Okay, so we're going to finish discussing Keller's book with whatever time we have left. I'll let you work on your letter. I'll give you an opportunity, I hope, to ask questions about that letter. I have quite a few questions about that letter, most of which were answered by the sheet that I gave you, but I know you'd probably rather hear it than read it. And then also, you'll have time tomorrow to work on your letter. In fact, I think you'll have after your first quiz for tomorrow. You'll have the rest of the hour to work on your letter. So please come prepared to do that. If you were not prepared to dole out Chromebooks yet, so we don't have a procedure for that. So if you need a laptop, you can get a laptop from the computer lab. If you need if you bring your own, that's fine as well, or you can just work with a piece of paper. So we'll do that tomorrow, but for now we're going to finish talking about chapter 8 in the Reason for God. I have some questions here. I think I asked you at least the first one yesterday, rather than saying we have proof for God. That Tim Keller uses the word clues, clues for his reality or his fingerprints, isn't divine fingerprints, is another thing he says. And I think we did number 2 as well. Did we talk about the Big Bang as a clue for God's reality? Yeah, okay, so I think that's where we ended, if I'm right. Did we talk about the regularity of nature?
I think we're getting to that in the nature.
Excellent. Excellent. But then the bell rang, so. It's plugged in. So why is the regularity of nature a clue for God's reality? Let's start with this. What does Keller mean by the regularity of nature? Yeah.
Like the laws of nature.
Yeah, the laws of nature. Nature, our universe, follows laws. Always. Like us when we get in a car and, we're, I don't know, maybe driving home from Colorado, who knows? And possibly, maybe we're going a little above the speed limit, maybe not. That's Vermont teacher to lie, isn't it? Yeah. Human beings don't always follow laws. The universe does. Our world does. If the conditions are right, it is going to rain. If it's colder, it is going to snow. Our orbits are going to stay firm. Our orbit around the sun, the moon's orbit around us. And think about what a scary world it would be if there was not that regularity. Yeah, well, we never know where the moon's going to end up. Maybe it'll end up in Texas, And so that's what he means when he says the regularity of nature. So how is that a clue for God's reality? Yeah.
Because we put faith that those laws will be consistent.
Right, those laws will be consistent. Is that what happens when something happens accidentally? If you let's just take a car accident, for instance. Does order come from a car accident? Does purpose come from a car accident? If you have a car accident, does it always end up the same way every time? No. The only thing that comes from an accident is disorder, is chaos. And what we see in the universe is order and regularity. That doesn't happen in an accident. If you've ever seen an accident scene, it's chaotic. There's stuff everywhere. Now, there are people whose job it is, police people whose job it is to reconstruct that accident, and they can tell how fast people were going, who was at fault, all those things. But they have to create the order within that because the accident itself is disorder. So usually something that is ordered, like those words on the board that I need to change right now, I took time to do that. That was planned. In fact, I started out with trying to put a whole verse in there, and there was no way I could get it in, and I didn't have enough letters. And so I had to go back to the drawing board, and I tried to get it just in the middle. I think Michaela's going to tell me that it isn't exactly just in the middle. Were you one of the ones that came to me and said, oh, I thought you were one of the ones that came to say, can we help you? Because you really don't know how to do this. As two students did, two female students came to me and said, can I fix that for you? And I said, yes, you can. But that took intentionality, right? That took a plan. That took uh, someone to actually put it in place. And that's true about the regularity of nature. It's a clue for God's reality. Um, so everything in science is dependent on the laws of nature. Uh, we can overpower the laws of nature, but we can't negate them. Like when Apollo 13 took off, it overpowered gravity, but it didn't defy gravity. We can't do away with gravity. We can't control gravity. We can only overcome it for a while. So everything about our world is dependent on the laws of nature. So why is it so orderly? What makes it so orderly? Accident? Accidents don't work that way, as we just said. So if the universe was an accident, there would not be regularity. There would be chaos. Regularity only comes with intentional design. And that's what we see in our universe. And then the next question is, why is beauty a clue for God's reality? What is it about beauty that is a clue?
It's like the thoughts that come with it. It's like you look at a painting and you're like, oh, who made this? Like that kind of thought. Thoughts.
Okay. So the fact that we're drawn to it, desire it. Anything else? I don't know where it's going to be in your book. It's on page 133 of mine, so it will be close. So it's if you look somewhere around in the clue of beauty, it's the third paragraph in the clue of beauty. So our overarching headline is the clue of beauty. And then go 3 paragraphs down. You got that? Okay. So it says this. If there is no God, and everything in this world is the product of, as Bertrand Russell famously put it, an accidental collection of atoms, then there is no actual purpose for which we were made. We are accidents. If we are the product of accidental natural forces, then what we call beauty is nothing but neurological hardwired response to particular data. You only find certain scenery to be beautiful because you had ancestors who knew you would find food there. They survived because of that neurological feature. And now we have it too. In the same way, the music feels significant. That significance is an illusion. Love too must be seen in this light. If we are the result of blind natural forces, then what we call love is simply a biochemical response inherited from our ancestors who survived because this trait helped them survive. That idea that what we do and what we believe and how we act is all based on our ancestors and what helped them to survive. The kind of common name for it is survival of the fittest, but it's evolutionary biology. And the term is adaptive advantage, like we adapt to our advantage. We adapt so that we can survive. And so what it's saying is that what we call beauty, whether that's a picture or a painting or a scene in a movie or looking at the flat irons of the Garden of the Gods. By the way, and I don't want to throw anyone, but my van in Colorado thought that the Garden of the Gods, and they saw on the
Already
the
done
schedule.
this.
Oh, I did this yesterday.
Yeah.
You can maybe say that a little bit nicer. Okay. You could say it was his keys. Okay. Next time, don't shout at your teacher. Okay? I'm serious. I'm serious. We have a child class. Um, so, yeah, what we see that we see is beautiful. We really feel that. We really think that it is beautiful. When we love someone, we really love them. It isn't just neurons. Are neurons involved? Absolutely. There's psychology of but there's more to it than that. It's more than neurons firing in our brains. So Keller talks about the clue killer. And when he talks about the clue killer, um, it's talking about what we just talked about, evolutionary biology. In other words, that evolutionary biology, adaptive advantage, disproves all clues, all the clues. But after writing about that, Keller says that the clue killer is actually another clue. What does he mean by that?
He says that the clue killer ended up showing them one clue.
Okay, but first we have to talk about what is the clue killer. What do atheists say is the clue killer? And then we'll get to that.
Breaking small religion is
Yeah, essentially what that's saying is that religion only came to being because it had some sort of adaptive advantage. Religion had to in some way um, help the survival of people, or else it never would have come around. Listen, evolutionary biologists have to say that everything about us is because it gave us an advantage to survive. Everything did, because it can't be God, it can't be something supernatural. And so it must only be so. So there must only be Christians in the world that believe Christianity. Because when it began, or when religion began, it gave an adaptive advantage. It helped people survive. Think about that for a minute. Do you understand that that believers, that early humans believed things like thunder coming from gods and titans stomping around, and that is misinformation. And misinformation is never helpful. They believed things that were not true. But then let's also think about, does Christianity really give you an adaptive advantage? Did believing Christianity give the early Christians an adaptive advantage? No. While being a follower of Christ in the first century would likely get you killed. And in many places in our world right now, being a follower of Christ will get you killed. If you were on that Colorado Springs trip, you heard the story of Diaka, whose family wanted to kill him. He had to flee his own family. There was no adaptive advantage in Christianity when it came to being. But if you don't believe in God, if you are an atheist, you have to say that. But we don't know what it is. There had to be one. What was it? What was the adaptive advantage? So, evolutionary biologists say that religion and religious beliefs were endorsed by natural selection. In other words, they led to the survival of the fittest. But the history doesn't say that. The history of the world says something else. So under the clue killer, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs in, where it says, despite fierce debates. And I'm going to read a little bit of this and then talk about it a little bit. So despite fierce debates. Despite fierce debates within the field, evolutionary theorists all agree that our capacity to believe in God is hardwired into our physiology because it was directly or indirectly associated with traits that helped our ancestors adapt to their environment. That's why arguments for God appeal to so many of us. That's all there is to it. The clues are clues to nothing. However, there are many who believe not only that the clue killer argument has a fatal contradiction in it, but that it actually points to another clue for God. In the last part of Dawkins' The God Delusion, he admits that since we are the product of natural selection, we can't completely trust our own senses. After all, evolution is interested only in preserving adaptive behavior, not true belief. In the New York Times Magazine article, another scientist said, in some circumstances, a symbolic belief that departs from factual reality fares better. In other words, paranoid false beliefs are often more effective at helping you survive than accurate ones. And it goes on and talks more about that. And then turn, please, to there's a paragraph that begins, evolutionists say that if God makes sense to us. So go to that one. Evolutionists say that if God makes sense to us, it is not because he is really there. It's only because that belief helped us survive, and so we are hardwired for it. However, if we can't trust our belief-forming faculties to tell us the truth about God, why should we trust them to tell us the truth about anything, including evolutionary science? If our cognitive faculties only tell us what we need to survive, what is true, why trust them about anything else? In other words, if we can't trust that there is true reason to believe in God, we can't trust there's true reason to believe in algebra or history or anything. Because the same brain that makes decisions about God makes decisions about those things. So the last paragraph of that section says this. It comes down to this. If, as the evolutionary scientists say, what our brains tell us about morality, love, and beauty is not real, if it is merely a set of chemical reactions designed to pass on our genetic code, then so it is what their brains tell them about the world. Then why should we trust them? And then in the next section he says, I think that ultimately the supposed clue killer ends up showing us one more clue for God to put beside the others. Here's the last thing. Last things I want to say about this. If evolutionary biologists are going to be honest and fair, they must admit that we can trust things our minds tell us about things, including what our minds tell us about God. Or they must admit that we can't trust our minds about anything, including evolution. And then here's a kind of a summary of the clue killer is really a clue. The clue killer is really a clue because without God, nothing makes sense. You can't really believe anything. And yet, we believe things make sense. And we go on believing in math and science and beauty and other things. We may believe that life is meaningless, but it turns out that we can't and we don't live that way. We don't live as though life is meaningless. We see our relationships as meaningful. We see our work as meaningful. We see the outcome of sporting events as meaningful. Why is it that even the Nebraska Cornhusker football team loses and loses and loses, and this Saturday, when the number one offense in college football comes to town, I will put on my sweatshirt, my Husker sweatshirt, and I will watch that game, even if I end up crying. Why? Because it means something. And I can't shake that. And none of us can. The stuff that is meaningful to us truly is meaningful. The people we love, we truly love. So might that mean that there truly is meaning in the world? And that in itself would be another clue for God. Because meaning can't come from science. Meaning can only come from outside of ourselves. And so it turns out that the way we live and the fact that we continue to believe that things matter points to a God who created the entire universe. So that's all I want to talk about for that. So you can have the rest of the class period to work on your letter, and then you will have time you'll have all of tomorrow to work on that as well after your first quiz. Questions about the assignment? Because I had quite a few. Sorry.
May I come to the computer lab to type out mine? Because I finished writing everything down.
Okay, let's talk about that in just a minute. Any questions about the assignment? Okay, good.